News and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darian, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through the comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
On the roll, Ms. Acosta will not be here. Ms. Nygam?
Here.
Ms. Downey?
Here.
Mr. Griffin?
Here.
Mrs. Norian?
Here.
Mrs. Walker? Mr. Walsh? Mr. Darian?
Here.
Mrs. Nichols?
Open to the public for agenda items only. Not seeing any. We'll move to superintendent's report.
Normally, I would use today to share a little bit about our week of respect, but I am going to hold off on that because at our next board meeting, Mrs. Hawley, as the anti-bullying coordinator, will present our annual HIB self-assessment. And at that meeting, Ms. Avgerinos, who may not know this yet, and Mr. Hagopian will be bringing some students to also share about the Week of Respect activities because it melds so well with that specific report. Just some other exciting things that are going on. We have been notified that the New York Giants will be visiting Oradell Public School, and at first we were like, oh, okay. We actually just learned that we are one of only 2 schools in the state of New Jersey that are getting this visit as part of the program, and they have chosen us based on our work with the American Heart Association, formerly American Kids Heart, used to be Jump Rope for Heart, whatever we're now calling it. But they will be here on the 17th, and we are incredibly excited as we are learning more and more that it's quite an accomplishment. As you know from our newsletter this year, over the past 4 years, we have donated $100,000 to the American Heart Association through the Kids Heart Challenge. So it's nice that our students are going to get something a little special, and Oradell Public School gets a little press also from the event. The other thing that is happening this weekend is we will have several staff members at the Oradell Kids Foundation, Oradell Fire Department 5K and Fun Run. I'm very excited that Mrs. Hawley will be starting the fun run with Mr. Urbanovich, the middle school principal, and Mr. Pepe, the high school principal. And I did send her a text today and ask her if she wanted me to buy her that special umbrella hat, because while we are hoping the rain will stay away, we may need them. So if anybody else is walking, several staff members will be walking with Mrs. Hawley and me, and we welcome anyone else to join our little contingency, but we will be doing the fun walk, not the 5K. And one of the other final piece that I shared with personnel today, but I am incredibly excited to share that putting in the newsletter that we asked for substitute teachers and holding that introduction meeting actually resulted in 8 new staff members for Oradell Public School. And sometimes when you do something and you take a little risk like that, it actually works. That's pretty exciting, and it's bringing members of our community into the building as well. So you will see 1 additional sub on your personnel addendum today that wasn't additionally there because of that effort. And that concludes my report today.
Thank you. Business Administrator's report.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, minutes. Review of September 20th. Any questions, comments, please email Mr. Iapelli. We have approval of meeting minutes September 6th and revised minutes of June 28th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Ms. Nygam?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes on September 6th, abstain on June 28th.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh is not here. Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Committee reports administrative. Mr. Darian, would you take that?
Yes, I'd like to introduce items A1 for our nursing services plan and A2 cardiac respiratory emergency action plan.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Nygam,
Yes?
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh, not here, Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Darian.
Yes, I'd like to introduce items B1 for facility use.
I'll second it.
Second by
It's
Mrs.
unusual
Norian. Any
without
questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Darian?
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't notice this earlier. Otherwise, I would have emailed you. But I do have a question, either Megan or Peter. For Oradell Junior basketball on Saturday, we're charging $58.81 an hour. I thought we schedule or offset the schedules for the custodians that they cover Saturday. Instead of them working Monday through Friday, somebody works like Tuesday through Saturday.
Yes. If you notice right above that line, it says the first 8 hours, no charge on Saturdays.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Mrs. Walker?
And also on B2, there is no facility charge. It's the Girl Scouts. Am I assuming that there would be no charge for them?
No charge. It just is missing an NA,
Down
that's
at
all.
the bottom. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Nygam,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Mrs. Negum, curriculum?
Yes, so I don't have anything else to report today. I'm happy to present item C1.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Nygam,
Yes?
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Finance, Technology, Mr. Griffin.
Yes, our next Finance and Technology meeting will be October 9th. If you have any items that you want us to be reviewing during that meeting, please get them to us sooner rather than later. And with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion for D1 through D5.
And I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Nygam,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes?
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Personnel, Mrs. Walker?
Yes, I'd like to present E1. And I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Norian. Any questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mrs. Nygam,
Yes?
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes?
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, we will skip delegate report policy, Mrs. Norian.
Yes, I would like to present for first reading the closed policies. I ask that you look carefully at those policies, and if there's any question or if you have any comments or things that you would like included in that policy, please get them to me or to Ms. Bozios, and we'll include them in the actual policy for the second reading.
Public Relations, Ms. Acosta's not here. Mr. Griffin, you're on there?
We have a meeting coming up on October 13th at noon, I believe. So that's the update at this point. No other actions.
And we're going to start, you're going to bring samples of surveys at that point? Is that what we're doing?
Prior to that meeting, I will send the committee some draft surveys, and this way we can use that as a jumping off point and decide what you want to take off or add to the survey.
And if anyone else has anything that they want in the survey, obviously you can add it later, but if you want anything in the survey going home, email Ms. Bozios, myself, Ms. Acosta. But you'll see it before anyway. Mrs. Walker.
So
Is this survey then a general survey, or are we looking for something specific?
We don't know yet. It's culture and climate, and we're going to see samples, and we do it every few years, and we're going to put some things together, and anything needs to be added to it. So if you have anything you're interested in, send it over.
Thank you.
And sorry, did we say that we will get to see the draft of that? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Public relations, okay, open to the public. Moving on, any old business or new business?
I
Mrs. Dorey?
would just like to mention, I understand that Riverdale had a presentation on Monday with regards their, the referendum that they're putting forward, and I didn't know if any of us had attended it. I know I was at another meeting, so I was not available, but I think that we ought to know what's going on.
Was
with
it
that.
recorded?
Yeah,
Okay, so it's on their website?
okay, so it's on the
No,
website.
it was recorded? I'm
I
asking you.
believe, I
Okay.
think it was, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I know that somebody mentioned that they have trifolds, so we could start there with information. If I can grab some trifolds from some of the members of the board and at least distribute them, so we have a kind of a jump-off place, so we know what's going on, we can see what it is they're asking for.
There's a video.
What's that?
There's a video on their website.
Oh, there is a
Yeah,
video
like
on the website.
Riverdale rep-
There it is.
Okay,
Referendum, there it is, 2023.
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just wanted to check because the superintendent had come to us last time, and I just wanted to be sure that we kind of kept to the loop and knew what was going on over with our sending district,
And
or
when
receiving
is the vote?
receiving district, yes.
So I
Mrs.
saw
Walker?
on the poster, it's December, it's not.
Yeah, the
it's
vote
like
is in
a separate
It'll be
vote.
after.
It's a separate
Yeah.
vote, yes.
Okay.
But we ought to get all that information so that we all know it, and, I mean, it's their job to present it to the public, but we as a board, I think, should probably know what's going on there.
I remember, this is going way back when they had a referendum for upgrading the school and so on. This is going back years ago. They appeared, the superintendent and a couple of board members made the rounds to all different clubs and groups and organizations.
I think they're doing that,
Are they?
yeah.
Okay.
At least that was the information, but I think,
haven't heard
yeah.
of them going anyplace yet. Maybe they'll.
I think they just opened it up with the meeting that they had this past week and with the video that they have.
Right.
So I just wanted us to be aware, that's all.
Any other old or new business? Any need, oh, Mrs. Walker?
Just a comment, we had a block party last Saturday, First, Second, Third Street and surrounding blocks and all, and it was just nice to get down and visit with everybody. But a number of folks all commented on how pleased they were with OPS, that the administration especially, and their kids' teachers, they will, and I didn't solicit it, it was in the discussion, so it made me feel very happy and proud to be just a very minute part of that whole process. So kudos to our superintendent and all the staff.
Any need to go into a closed session?
Nope. So I move to adjourn.
Second?
I'm going to do a roll call. Roll call?
On the roll, Mrs. Nygam,
Here?
Mrs. Downey,
Here.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes?
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes.
Is that a record?
It's closed.
Is that a record?
What's that? watching this?
Nothing substantive to update. No. I forgot.